So quantity, the next piece. Keep intake levels to support exercise, but not body fat. Okay, so this is where we start to dive in a little bit more. Okay, so how much? So, where do you start? First thing is that how often are we eating? Now, there are plenty of studies that are done about, like, if I need to eat every 2 hours, if I eat once a day, intermittent fasting, all of these like buzzwords that you're going to hear within it. So what I would say is just start with a 12-hour window. That's 6 to 6. Okay? Some of us don't like to eat breakfast. That's okay. You're just going to have to consume more calories in there, because I'd be surprised if, and I'm guilty too, on days where I'm not eating enough. You'd be surprised at how many of you or people that you know, their metabolism is so jacked up because they're not eating enough, right? It's like, what'd you have today? I had an apple. Your brain needs 900 calories just to function correctly every day. There's not 900 calories in an apple, right? But I wasn't hungry. Tough shit. Figure it out. Drink a protein drink. Get some food in your system, right? So start there. Next thing, breaking it across multiple meals if you can. Now, I understand that there are people that can't eat like that. That's okay. That just means you're going to have to condense your window even more. But trying to keep your intake levels the same every day across multiple meals. Now, how many meals that is for you, it's completely up to you. Again, whatever works for you. I understand that you have a job that doesn't allow you to do that. Here's what I will say. We won't get into supplements too much till the end. If you have enough time to pee, you have enough time to eat. I don't care if you're doing them at the same time. You get my point. You guys get my point. I'm joking when I say that. You get my point, though. My point being is that everyone says, well, I don't have enough time to eat. Then that's the first thing I ask. Do you pee? Yeah. Okay. Then be prepared to have a shake on your way in or way out. Okay? I know at least I don't personally drink protein shakes for the taste. Now, do they taste good? Sure, if I actually sat down and enjoyed them. But instead, I'm just chugging and going. Because the idea of supplementation is that it is supplementing my whole foods because I can't get whole foods in at that time. Okay? So, now breaking this down. This is where we start to get into the numbers. In terms of grams of protein per body pound, 0.8 to 1.2. Or just say 1. If I weigh 200 pounds, I try to get 200 grams of protein in my day every day. Okay? 4 ounces of chicken is 24 grams of protein. Okay? 4 ounces is about, I got a big hand, it's about this big. It's very small. Okay, it's very small. You'd be surprised at how dense 4 ounces of beef is. I'd probably say it's 2/3 of my hand. Okay? So I'm not talking a ton. Okay? So, a gram of protein per body pound for you. We'll talk about when we want to, if say that I want to be, if I'm 200 pounds and I want to be 190, or if I want to be 210. We'll talk about that in a second as we get into breaking down how much. The other thing too is breaking down into percentages. So, 30% of your intake should be protein, 30% should be fats, 40% can be carbohydrates. That's a baseline. Everything I'm telling you guys is a starting point. Okay? How you change those percentages is going to be up to you. Okay? And what you're trying to achieve and where you're at here. Okay? So, that's a good starting point. We can break down the numbers individually. If I weigh 200 pounds, I start to break down. Now, when it comes to calories, does anyone know how many calories are in a gram of protein?
4.
Good. Carbohydrates.
4.
And then fat.
9.
There you go, 9. Okay, 449. The reason I say that is because a lot of people get concerned with how many calories I'm taking in. Let's not get there. Okay, healthy relationship. What you can do is say, I'm trying to get 200 grams of protein, right? Then you can figure out how many calories are in that. I'm trying to get this many carbohydrates, this is how many is in that. I'm trying to get this much fat, that's how much is in that. The macro numbers should be a higher priority than your calorie intake. okay? Because the calories are going to be a given based on how many grams of whatever you're taking in, okay? A lot of times, too many people get caught up in this idea that I've got to eat a certain number of calories. Ignore that. Focus on what you're actually trying to eat, the quality of your protein, the amount of fat, and the amount of carbohydrates. And as you go through this process, right, and reassessing, and we'll get into all those in a second, but reassessing, you start making adjustments. You want to try to keep your protein around that same level, right? 1 gram to 1.2, or going down to 0.8 if you have to, somewhere in between there. That should never change. The things that the dials or knobs that you'll be turning, how much fat am I taking in versus how much carbohydrates I'm taking in. The more fats I take in, the less carbohydrates I can take in, because there's more fat, there's more calories in a gram of fat than there is in a gram of carbohydrates. So I can end up taking like 200 grams of protein, 350 grams of carbohydrates, but only 80 grams of fat. If I kind of go to 120 grams of fat, I end up severely decreasing my number of carbohydrates because those dials have been changed. Okay, they're not equal. They're not even 2 to 1. Okay, so we'll tweak there. That's a good starting point. Now, if you're asking yourself, like, what does that look like for me? There are apps that you can use, so they're kind of putting it in practice. So we set that baseline, right? A good tracking app that works for you. I know that a lot of us, I know personally in the past, I've used MyFitnessPal. It has a great inventory of things. You can put all your stuff in there. When we start talking about tracking these things to get your baseline, yes, you're going to have to track your food. Okay? Is that a long-term solution? Not necessarily. If you like to do that and it doesn't bother you physically or mentally, right, in your relationship with food, then continue to do it. But you need to understand what you're taking in, how much you're taking in, so that you can start to make good decisions. And then as you start to get away from that app or that thing that you're using to track exactly how much, that you're not overeating or undereating. Okay? So it's a great way of holding yourself accountable, just like we put stuff into Wodify. Okay? It lets you know what you're doing. Okay? So once you establish that baseline, you want to implement that plan for at least 4 weeks. Okay? That's your opportunity to see and if you're having a good experience with it, right? At first, if you don't know how much you're eating, or you're actually overeating, you might feel like you're not eating enough every day. Well, that kind of will let you know that maybe you've been eating too much. For some people, when they change it and they're actually eating more vegetables or eating more food, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm eating all the time. Well, it's because you haven't been eating enough, right? Or the fact that 2 cups of green is a much more dense thing than 1 thing of like processed cookies, right? You know what I mean? Like that little snack of cookies is going to have more calories and is not going to be processed. It's just going to go right through your system than if you're actually eating some higher quality, dense, vegetable. Does that make sense? Okay. So setting yourself up for success by putting those things into practice, and again, at least 4 weeks. Make an assessment, make a judgment change, and then figure out where you want to go. Now, the next page, putting it into practice. Okay? So this goes into a lot of detail on how you can do these things. So the first thing is what and how much. That's establishing what I'm going to eat, meat, vegetables, nuts, seeds, so forth and so on, right? Then basing it on the percentages of what you are going to be trying to hit 30, 30, 40, right? Keeping intake levels to support exercise, etc. Okay? And these are just allowing you to find those things, right? Establishing health markers. Maybe you already know that you've got high triglycerides. So I've got my triglycerides, I know this is a high number, 300. Okay? That's not good. Okay? Right? If my numbers are really high, in the next 4 weeks, I'm going to go back to the doctor. I'm going to try to get my blood work done. And did I go down from 300 to 200? I'm making a good decision. I'm making good choices. I'm going to continue doing this, right? So those are your numbers, your baselines, your assessments. Trying to do this on a daily basis, right? So I'm eating whole unprocessed foods. When I say unprocessed foods, cooking your food is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. buying frozen stuff is okay too. It's, did I buy it in a box, and does it have an ingredient list? Right, I think that's the key, right? Did I have hamburger helper, right? That's the stuff that we try to avoid, is the stuff in the middle of the grocery store. And then, of course, we check and recheck, okay? But the other thing too is also making sure that you're not only taking in internal and external variables. So if you come in and you're just like, man, I had a really bad week because I wasn't getting enough sleep due to work or due to a family issue, or like, you can't go and say, I didn't improve my Fran time. Well, how'd you sleep last night? Well, my kids were up, right? I didn't get to sleep last night. So you have to take into consideration some of the things that you don't have control over that will impact those things as you go forward into this journey, okay? And then you just reassess and you reapply and you adjust. So, as I said, tracking it with an app is a good starting point for us when we're doing this. And the first thing that you want to do is find an app that you find comfortable to work with, right? A lot of us use MyFitnessPal. Okay, that's a good place to go, right? You can get the premium version. I think it costs a little bit of money, right? I'm not saying you have to buy anything, but having that tracker for the first 4 weeks is what you're going to want to use to make sure you're not overeating or undereating. You're somewhere in between, okay? Now, when we start getting into tactics or kind of tools for staying on track, I think this starts to get into habits and things like that. What I want you to understand is that when you do this, if you're supposed to get 200 grams of protein a day and you get 215, it's fine. It really is. If you're supposed to get 300 grams of carbohydrates and you get 320, it's okay. It really is. Okay. The other thing too, a lot of people don't understand is that this is not just training days. You eat this way every day. I don't care if you train 3 days a week. You eat this way every day. Just because you didn't exercise doesn't mean you don't eat. Nothing changes there. Okay? Questions so far?
I have a tip on the MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
If you download it and say you're in Europe, it will let you scan barcodes so you don't have to pay for the premium version.
Nice.
US.
Nice.